Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're learning Chulin daf Lamed Ches. We're going to begin on Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, the second line from the bottom. Ashkachenu Shmuel Talmid Rav. Shmuel encountered the students of Rav. My Omer Rav Musukanes. So he said, what does Rav hold regarding to the din of Musukanes? So in yesterday's daf, we were introduced to this Mishnah that a person shechs an animal which is mesukenes, in danger of its life, so we require what's called pirchos, some type of sign that this animal still has some life to it. And there was a few opinions in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said it needs to move its hand and foot. In other words, the fore and the hind leg. Rabbi Lezer says zinka, which if the blood squirts out, and we'll discuss at what point of the shechita that applies, we'll see that today. And then we have the opinion of the Chachamim, says that shetirchos o biyad o beregel, not both, but either or. So what does Rav say about all this? Amrulei hachim Rav. This is what Rav says as we continue Lamed Ches Madav. Goyim v'hetila reya. He actually adds a few other things that we haven't learned yesterday. First of all, Gaya, for the animal starts screaming, making noise, so that also will count. Or Vetilareya, that it gives forth waste, or it wiggles its ears. So in those cases, that will be enough for there to be pirchos, that it would be a good shechita. Now, we don't require shechita, we don't require pirchos when it comes to an animal which has the chazak of being healthy, dafka when it comes to mesukenes, as we saw in the Mishnah. Sermelahu asrichale la'aba lazuzi uni. Abba, which is referring to Rav, and often he was called this because Shmuel showed kavod to him. He said that he needs to move the ears. Says Rashi, "Lafarches ha'oizin bitmia." What does that mean? The pirchos chiyus gadol huzeh. This is a huge sign. Shani oimer kol sheinu devarim shebemisa oise. I said that even things that aren't even on this level would still be enough for pirchos. My ninhu, what would that be? Devarim shehamisa oisa. Things basically that death does. In other words, if he doesn't act like a dead animal, then that would be enough for it to be pirchos. So you don't need to have all these extra things, according to my opinion, just as long as it doesn't act like an animal that's dead or dying. So therefore that would be sufficient. So this matter was further elaborated. If, let's say, the animal's foreleg was bent, upashtata, then it got stretched out, davar shehamisa oisa. However, pshut of a kfafa, if, let's say, it was stretched out and then it was bent, devarim she'ein hamisa oisa. So that's not something which misa does. So as Rashi says, she'ein hamisa oisa b'shas haitzas nefesh. When an animal dies, karile mesa. Of a mehem de kokoi de ilu gasa afil kafufa pashta havi pirchos. So this is, we're going to see, is talking about behema daka. Anyway, the Gemara asks the question. My kamash matanina. We already know this. Behema daka. If we're talking about a small animal, shepashta yada, it stretched out its hand, v'lo hechzir, but does not return it. Psula, because the fact that it had its hand stretched, and it stretches out its hand, that in itself does not prove anything. She'eno elo haitzas nefesh, ha hechzir kshera. But if, let's say, it was stretched out and then it came back, right? So then in that situation, that would be proof. So it seems like we already know this. So imas needs to have amina davka de kafi of pashta for the kaifa. You would think you need to do this sequence, that it was bent, straightened, and then bent again. Kafale. Aval pshuta v'kafta lo. However, in the case where it was stretched out and all was bent the first time, that was not bent, stretched, bent, but just stretched, bent, well, that wouldn't be pirchos. Kamashmon, this is pirchos too. So even though we quoted in the very top line that an animal shouting out and screaming, that in itself demonstrates it has some koyach inside of it, and therefore it's considered to be pirchos. Here Rameir disagrees. Rabbi Yosi Omer Mishmoi in his name, Afil Hatil Re'eya, even if let's say it shoots out waste, Bikishkasha Biznava, or its tail wags, in Zepirchos. So Kasha Gaya Kasha Re'eya. We have this Kasha because above we said that if it shouts out, that is Pirchos. Here it's not. Over there we said if it's Hatil Re'eya, if it shoots out its waste, that's Pirchos. Here it's not. So the answer is it's not a steer. Gaya lo Kasha. Ha Rabbi, ha the Avikola, ha the Amikola. It depends on the voice. If it's a deep, loud voice, so that's demonstrating that it in fact is it's considered to have koyach, has koyachius, and therefore because of that, that's pirchos, and therefore you could eat this animal. However, if it's ami kol, resh is kaya, weakened, a very weak sound, a very soft, weakened moan, so that's not pirchos. Rei namu kash, regarding the waist, it's not a stirakan bishay seses. That three toughs in a row. Bisho seses kan misrezes. So one is if it is shoiseses. Rashi says besamoich, right? It's just like dripping down right next to the animal. That doesn't mean anything because it doesn't demonstrate. It's just like it could be through gravity. Just naturally, it relieves itself at death. That doesn't demonstrate it had life to it. However, b'misrezes, as Rashi says, lemerachlik, that it flies out far. So then that is pirchos. Amrav chista. Pirchos amru. When we've been talking all along this notion of pirchos, b'sov shchita, it's referring to these things happened at the end of the shchita. Obviously, this is tchil shchita, in the middle of the shchita, and masayif. So we're saying these things is only a proof it happened at the end. So my b'sov shchita, it doesn't mean really the end. It means be'emsa shchita. It means even the middle. That's what fukit tchil shchita deloi. If anything's happened at the very beginning of the shchita, that doesn't prove anything. So Amrav Chisda Minam, how do we know that none? Behema daka, when it comes to a small animal, shapash the yad that stretched out his arm, the last year it doesn't return it, psula. Ema, so when do we say this? Elam b'sov shchita, that it's still not good. Kol hechi techaviv tezel, understand, this animal is already completely shechted, it's dead, right? So how much more life do you want it to demonstrate? Right, it's still able to live. Right, how far can it live? It says Rashi li'achar sheshachta lo tesagi b'pshitas yad b'loy kfifa v'chazer. How is it possible that the animal is going to be doing all these actions? It's already completely shechted. So how do you expect this animal just keep moving around? It's obviously it's dead already. So elola be'emsa shchita means even if these things happen in the middle of the shchita, so then that is where it's pirchos, which is coming to exclude chil shchita. So what do you mean? What do you expect? No shani oimer, because I say kol shein oisa came b'saif shchita, but it doesn't happen at the end. Biyadua she nishama natul himenu kaidem l'chein. Probably is a proof that it was dead even before that. And therefore, that actually is a raya. So not lav dafka is it mean be'emsa? No, it could even be talking about only b'saif shchita. So there you go. Now we have three different opinions. It's either definitely be'emsa, and we said, well, maybe not, maybe it's only b'saif. And then now we have another opinion that all of these proofs of pirchos actually takes place at the beginning. But Rashi points out an important detail. It's not to exclude. Even if it happens at the beginning, then it's kshera. Okay? So even though, again, it's mesukenes and everything like that, still that is sufficient. Okay. So that's a pretty big chiddush. He's saying that it's talking about tchil shchita even. Amrav Nachman Yitzchak when Amina let it not. Amrav Shimon. Hashayich b'layla, a person does shchita at night. And the next morning about 6 so it was pitch black, let's say, right? And And we saw it's supposed to be biavuka biyadoy lechatchila. Otherwise, it's done like a summa. It's only b'diavad. So let's say, and the next morning you find the ksol malayim dam. Then you find that the wall cavities of the animal are filled with blood, which means you probably did a good shechita. So kshera shezinka. Not only was it a good shechting, but also the blood squirted out, which is enough. One of the proofs of pirchas, as we saw in the Mishnah. Then we're talking about the walls of the throat. Now, if you want to tell me that this observation took place at the beginning of the shechita, makes sense. If it only happened at the end, so maybe it only happened at the beginning. Vidilma shani zinuk the adif, and zinuk is different, says Rashi. Why would it be good if it happened at the beginning? That this is what happened. But if you want to tell me that only is at the middle but not the beginning, who's going to tell you in the morrow about this blood squirting? How do we know it took place in the middle? Right? Right? Maybe it happened at the beginning. So if it's true that there's a time when this process won't that zinka won't help, so then how will you know when it took place? You don't know if the zinka took place at the beginning or the shechita in the middle. So if it's true it only helps in the middle and not in the beginning, so then it's problematic, because you should never rely on it because it maybe happened at the beginning. It must be it. Even though if it did happen at the beginning, it's okay, and it's still it's still enough for us to say that it's pirchos. So that's the point over here. This is the raya, right? So el iyamar b'sof shchita, like the middle, lichash dilma b'techil shchita zinka, right? Maybe it happened at the beginning, right? So it's a proof. Therefore, it's a proof it was at the beginning. At the beginning is also pirchos. Okay. So where it says, wait 1 second, V'dilma shani zinok the adif. Says Rashi, Oilam shar pirchusin lo havi pirchus el be'emsa o be'gemar shchita. Maybe pirchus is really at the middle or at the end. However, when it comes to zinok, we make an exception that it's considered to be a huge sign of pirchus. That's a living animal. Hilkach says Rashi, "Feel b'tchil shchita zinka shaper dami." So it is true. It has to be that zinka works and it's considered to be a good pirchos at even tchila shchita. But that doesn't mean necessarily that's the case by other signs. Maybe the other signs, taka, are only be'emsa or beso. Okay, so Gemara says, why would you say zinka is better than the other ones? But Rabbi Lezer Omer daya im zinka. He says it's enough if that's what happens. Now, what does that mean? It's enough. It's mashma that really is not necessarily the best option. So how can you tell me it's adif is better than the other ones? If he says, this I guess is sufficient. Where answers kal midor b'gamliel. The adif midor rabbanan. So this is actually like in the middle. It's less than the rabbanan, who said that all you need to do is the hand or the regel. But it's not as strong as Rabbi Gamliel, who requires both the yad and the regel to be moving for it to constitute as pirchos. So it is, relatively speaking, better, but only lefi shitas the rabbanon. Okay. Fine. So that's the answer. Omer Ravina Omer Li Samamar Chilkoi Akshila Avua Davar Avuvaram. So he says Rashi, Zehu avuvram atzmo umakirin hayu esaben. You had this person who recognized his son, v'las av, but not the father. While Yukarin Oisol Shem Benoi, so he was called after his son. Shasas Benoi Simon Loy. So he's given like this name. So avuvram is the name of a person. Yermala Achua Davar Avuvaram Umin Rabbanan Miadiv. Anyway, this is the person's name. So is it true that the Rabbanan who says that you need yad or regel, which seems like a pretty lenient opinion. Is it true that zinka is more than that? But tanan chachamim amrim ad shetifrachas o biad o regel. Now, what does that mean? Until you do this. So Rabbanan, hey, who's he kaimi? Who's he the Rabbanan contrasting or going against? Who says that you have to have both the hand and the foot. Kivan shepirachas boile. He should say the word kivan. In other words, instead of it being both, kivan, just as long as you have this, that would be enough, hand or foot. El Pshita, obviously he's not going on that. Rather, it's out of Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer mentions zinka. Now, v'yadif my ad. So why does he mention the word ad? Says Rashi Mashma the chomer. Zinka is not enough. It's got to be only ad, only until you do this, which is mashma that really the Rabbanan are more machmir. So that basically we're going back to our question that not necessarily is it true that zinka is better than anything else. So again, the question is, so why does zinka work by tchilas shchita? Must be because tchilas shchita works by pirchas, and maybe all the other pirchas will also work by tchilas shchita as well. Rabbi Omer pirchas shamru b'sof shchita. It's at the end. Omer Rabbi Menamina. How do I know that it's at the end? Says Rashi, soif mamish, right? Only at the end, but not the middle or the beginning. So only at the end, all these simanim mean anything for it to be pirchos. So Amar Rabbi Menamina Desani. How do I know this? Because it says like this. Sure, as we continue to Lamed Chesamid base, with regard to an ox, O kesev. So when the pasuk says these words, is prat l'kilayim. So what is it referring to? Ben Rachel v'tayish sheposel carbon. So it has to be an animal that is not a mixed breed, not one that you somehow cause these two animals to come together. So it has to be a specific ashor or kesef. O A's. So what is that coming to add? Prat with nidba, coming to an animal that appears or resembles that of a different animal. Says Rashi, A's sheyolda mitayish kamoisa uvenad daimel racha. So even though it looks like a sheep, it's got to be the precise one. Ki evaled probably yotzi daifen. If you have an animal that was born like through a cesarean, so that's possible for a carbon. Shivash yamim probably chusser zman. You have to wait at least until the seventh day to be able to bring a carbon. Otherwise, it's a mechusser zman. Tachas imai pratli yosam. So it has to be tachas imai, this animal. It's coming to exclude a yosam, which is mashma that the animal, its mother died. Now, hayos yosam hechidami. What are we talking about in this case? That this animal, that this died. So let's look at Rashi. Tachas imo. Rashi says v'chil oyom srichel chiyos v'tachas imo krin be. Right. So what exactly does that mean? It says the Gemara ilema diliel date amiya v'hader meta, that the mother gave birth and then afterwards the mother died. So oyom ticha v'tezel, must it remain alive forever? In other words, you're telling me we're coming to exclude a yatom, let's say an animal, like people who are I'm an orphan, right? Person's parents died and they were 100 years old, and you're 82 years old, I'm a yatom. It is true, you don't have parents, but it's not really the same thing as how we envision what an orphan is. So it's the same thing over here. If you have an animal that its mother died, that's the normal routine. The fact that the animal died afterwards, let's say the animal was born and now the animal's 10 years old and its mother, which is 20 years old, died, right? That's not like such a chiddush over here. There would be no logic to say that type of animal would be puzzled just because its mother died. So how do we understand when we talk about this animal which is a yatom? El demet of a hadar yilidte. Rather, it means that the mother died and then afterwards it gave birth. In other words, it was born after the mother died. So mechi yavali nafka. We already learned it from this other pasuk, which is very clear. The pasuk says it has to be that the mother gives birth, excluding if the mother had already died, and then you have to somehow get the animal out. Elipshita, what is the case? That would be puzzle the carbon. Zepir Shamisa, Zepir Shalchayim. We hear this a lot. In other words, its mother animal died at childbirth. So it gave birth to the child, and at that same moment, that same time, is how the animal died. Says Rashi, Kaloimer b'shas misasa. At the time of its death, Yolda derech harechem. It was born in the normal way. V'ashmin and Krob, the pasuk still saying, D'be'inan chiyus ad gemar leida. It needs to be alive at least until the birth has completed. As well as a little bit after, just even a moment after. So if the animal died right away at the time of its birth, that would exclude it from being able to bring this young as a carbon. Now, if it's true that you're telling me that it's necessary that the chiyus has to come at the end of the birth, so that's why you need this pasuk to exclude this situation. If you don't need life at the end of the birth, so again, why need this pasuk? You can still learn out from that pasuk. So Rava Hilchasa, at the end of the day, this is the halacha. Okay, ready? Ki ha demastisa. Behema daka. What is pirchos? When it comes to a small animal, like a little sheep or goat, shipash di yada. Let's say it stretched out its hand. V'lo hechzir, but did not return it. Psula. B'medim or more biyad. That's only if it's foreleg. Of a beregel, when it comes to its hind legs, bein pashta v'lo kafva, bein kafva v'lo pashta kshera. So the chiddush is by the hind legs. If it moves in either direction, that's enough. However, when it comes to the foreleg, it has to be that it returns back. That is the minimal. B'medibar more bedaka. All that is by a behem bedaka. V'bagasa. Let's say we're talking about a cow or a bull. Ben biyad, ben beregel, ben pashta v'lo kafva, ben kafva v'lo pashta kshera. So it's pretty easy. When it comes to a behemagasa, any motion is pirchos. A behemadaka, the back legs is always pirchos. The foreleg, it depends. V'of afil lo rifrif el gapo. Even if all it did was flap, Rashi says, is batzer mikishkush. It's even less than a huge flapping, like a small little fluttering of its wings. V'lo kishkesh el navai, and all it did was like move its little tail. Harizeh pirchos, that would be good enough. So my kamashma and kutanini, we already learned all this. Behema daka shabash yavol hechzer b'sula v'sheno she'eno elo haitzos nefesh. Yad in, regel low. Right? We know that's only by yad, but not by regel. Regel we're always lenient. And also, that whole stringency by the yad is only by daka. Daka in gasa low. So oaf it's tzrichale. You're right. By the behema, there's no daka or gasa. We can figure that out. But we didn't know about the oaf. Oaf, it's tzrichale, the lo tanan. The whole dinim of what's pirchas for a bird, that was something which was not mentioned. Okay, now we went pretty deep. Let's go to a couple questions. Start off with question 11. Rav Omer Pirchus Amru B'Soiv Shchita Mehechem maybe Rabba Rayel Esvrasa the Metzina Chiagavda the Bo Rabbanan Chiyusa B'Gemar delay V'Hu Adin the Hacha to be in the Chiyusa B'Gemar Shchita. So we find this, as we just saw, by the Tom. When it came to the Tom, this animal that is an orphan, that its mother died, so you cannot bring it as a carbon. Now, why is it possible? So that's there's a kosev. It's excluding a yatom. And we're forced to say, let's just read what it says in Dirshu. It must be talking about after it gave birth. If it's not the case that way, then typically the yaitza daifanu, you can say it's a yaitza daifan, that you had to get the animal out. So it must be that all of this took place at the end of birth. So too, when it comes to the shchita, it's at the gemar. So basically, just like over by this yatom, we're saying that we need for the mother to be alive at the end of its birth, Gemar. So too, the pirchus is only at the Gemar shchita, which comes to exclude Techila and even the Emsa shchita. Question 12. Behema shepashta yada oragel v'hechzira im havi pirchus. So it just says the word behema. So behema gasa always is a pirchus. However, by behema daka, it depends. If it's pashta yada, if it stretches out, v'hechzira doesn't return it, that's only good for a pirchus. That's only pirchus for behema gasa, not for a daka. But if it stretches out its hindquarters and doesn't return it, it's pirchus straight across the board. Okay. TA 6. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omer pirchus she'omru b'tchila shchita. Here's the different one. What's the proof that it was tchila shchita? So he saw that by zinka, right? If you woke up the next morning and you found out, TA 6, that that there's blood on the basic solemn, so that must be that it's kasha because of zinka. Now, it's possible, what happens if tchila shchita isn't enough for pirchus, so then how do we know? Maybe it was at the beginning. How do you know when this blood splattered? If it must be, we don't know. So, but why would we say it's kosher? It must be that it doesn't matter. That even if it is a tchila shchita is also enough, and therefore taket is a raya that pirchus works even by tchila shchita. Of course, works by the others too. TB 9, same question. Wrote im shachat b'layel v'boiker nimsa sheish dam shezinka al kaisel, and is by the neck. V'im pirchas einu b'tchila shchita dilma zinka b'tchila shchita. Beautifully written, very clean answer that I wrote. That TB 9, beautiful. Okay. All right, let's see the next Mishnah. Let's go a little bit into the next Mishnah. Hashaychet li'ovi kachavim. So you have a yid, right, and he shechs for an akum. The yid does the shchita, and he knows what he's doing, right? So it's not going to be an issue of any of the 5 hilcha shchita, but there's a problem that this person you're shechting for, it could be l'shem avodah zarah. So shchita ksher, we still say it's fine. However, it was a paisel. Rashi says why? Why is it possible? So the kivan de behema de v'chachavim this animal belongs to this idol worshiper. After Lev Yisrael keshachet, even though it's true that the yid is the one who did the shchita, behind machshavas of v'chachavim, the stam machshavda of v'chachavim. So even though the yid, the big heilig tzaddik of a yid, did the shchita, and he had all the great machshavas you're supposed to have, so Rabbi Lezer says that doesn't matter because the animal's owner is an idol worshiper, and therefore his machshav is for the sake of idol worship, and therefore even though he asks someone to a tzaddik to shecht for him, that won't help. So Rabbi Lezer, afil shachtel lechel avikachavim michatzer kaved shula psula. It doesn't matter, even if what you're going to do is shecht specifically for the sake of its diaphragm, which apparently that's something in which is not used for avodah zarah. It doesn't make any difference. He holds that straight across the board. Any idol worshiper, his machshav is for idol worship. It doesn't even matter if it's the machzer kaved, the diaphragm. Doesn't matter what it is. It's still going to invalidate. So we actually have a kal v'chomer over here. When it comes to having an improper machshava, namely that of pigul, regarding kachim like karbanos, we find in hakol hoylach ella acher ha'oved. We go after the only one doing the avoda, not the owner, right? So we don't know what the owner's machshava is. Chutz zmanoi, chutz kaimoi. We care about the kohen b'shashchita, b'shazrika. If he has an improper machshava, that can passel it. So what do we see? We go basar the machshava of the one doing the action, not the owner of the animal. So makom shein machshava v'selas b'chulin. If you have an improper machshava by chulin, no one cares. Enu din shli he'akol hoylach el achar hashaychet. We should go after the shaykhet. So basically, this is a counter argument to Rabbi Lezer. Apparently, we have a good kavachaymer to demonstrate that it should only go after the one who does the avoda. And how do we see this by pigul? Rashi says, "Zechsiv hamakriv v'yichashev." When it comes to pigul, the improper machshava is the one who's being makriv it, not the one, not the owner. So apparently, it should be the same thing. We don't care. We shouldn't care who the owner is. The fact that he's an idol worshiper. It was shechted properly. It should be good enough. Okay. Now, Hani Tanoi Isulhu Rabbi Lezer B'Reb Yosi. The following Tana or Tanoi are in support of this sheet of our Mishnah of what we just saw. Isulhu Rabbi Lezer B'Reb Yosi. The Sanya. Rabbi Lezer B'Reb Yosi. Shemaiti. I heard Shabalim Mifalgin. I actually hold not that only that the Kohen, the one who's makar the carbon, obviously can have pigul, but even the owner has an improper machshava that could also be an issue of pigul, which apparently we didn't know this before, but this is the case. Miu Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama who brought down this whole kavachomer saying that it doesn't work like that. Some they hold Ishamani the chashiv in ilalo. That's only if you actually hear the guy saying it. It's not like in between. You know, the guy who is the owner of this animal says, I want this animal to be chutzlas manai. I'm going to eat a chutzlim kaimai. So if you hear that, that's a problem. But if you don't hear him say anything, we're not going to assume that he's going to have any improper thoughts. Right? Ilaloi. Stam machshavas chachavim, lavas chachavim, lo amrina. However, when it comes to an akum, we don't say that. We actually will go restrict. So in other words, it may be true what you're saying. And maybe it is the owner can also mess things up. But that's only if he actually verbalizes it. But stam, if he says nothing, we're not going to think the worst. When it comes to avodas kachavim, we do think the worst. We're going to assume that it was for idol worship. And since it's for idol worship, so therefore, even though a yid is the one who did the shkita, will still possible if he is Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer savar, so Rabbi Lezer will hold. So stam machshavas over kachavim, avodas kachavim. Let me read this again. Miu Tanakama Savar Shemani the Chashiv in Ilolo. Right? That if you don't hear him say this is actually referring not just to pigul, but first, according to Tanakama, the idol worshiper. If you hear him, that's one thing. But Stam Machshavas Chachavim Lo Amrinan. We don't say this. We don't assume that the person is going to be Oived Avodah Zara, has that machshava. Maybe not. If you hear him say it, fine, it will passel it. Okay. And just like the notion of pigul. But if you don't hear him say it, it won't work. It won't passel. So therefore, if a yid does a shkita for Novik Chavim, it works. But let's just say, no, Afagad the Lo Shami, the Chashiv Stam Machshavas of the Chavim, Amrinan. So this doesn't make any difference. Even if you don't hear a word from him, he's an idol worshiper. What do you expect? He's an idol worshiper. You have to hear him say, I'm doing it for idols. We know he does things for idols. So stam, you should assume it is for Chachavim. So therefore, it will pass. So basically, this is answer number 1. Let's look at question 13. So what is the machlokas? So there's 2 answers. The first one we just saw is whether we say that stam machshavas chachavim. Very simple. Right? If you hear him, everyone agrees that that's a problem. However, it'll be a pasal shchita. However, you don't hear him, are we just going to assume that's avodah zarah or not? So, according to Rabbi Lezer, he assumes that it is for avodah zarah, no matter what. Rabbi Yosi comes along and says, wait 1 second. He says, and his reason will be explained later on, that he says, even though you did hear all of this business, right? So, in other words, says Rashi, okay, I didn't get to that yet. So that's a different opinion. Some say a little bit differently. A different answer. Actually, when you actually heard him with this, is where they argue that even so the Tanakama will still say it's good. Tanakama savar ki amrin and zemachashav ze oived hani mili bifnim. The only time we say this din is inside of a b'chutz, when we're talking outside by karbanos, not by karbanos, just by chulin. Well, we don't say that because chutz mifnim lo amrin lo yalfinan. We don't make this connection. So just because maybe that's the din by a carbon about pigel, that doesn't mean that's the same thing when it comes to shechting chulin, that we're going to have such a stringency. So therefore it's going to be kosher. However, and we're going to conclude with this line, the Asr b'lezer l'meimer yalfina chutz mifnim. We could learn one from the other. And therefore, just like inside an improper machshava pigel apostle, so too on Kachavim, who you hear him say, this is for idol worship, that will be a problem. Because he learns chutz b'fnim. Yasrav Yisrael Meimer, I feel b'fnim nami, even inside, zemachashem ze'oived lo amrinan. No, so he'll say it's even kosher there. We don't care what the owner thinks, we care about the Kohen, that's it. Question 13, second answer is, Tanakama holds lo amrinan zemachashem ze'oived b'chutz. Right, it's only bifnim, but that maybe we'll say that, but not b'chutz, and therefore by chulin, even if you hear him say it, doesn't make any difference. It's still kosher. However, according to the sheet of Rabbi Lezer, he says no, it's like that bifnim. It's also like b'chutz. If you hear him say it, then it becomes problematic. Okay, we'll stop there. Maybe one more question. TA7, no. TB10, no. Adkan.